Today we are talking about mid-career pivots, and with us we have Stacy Swift, and we have Jeffrey Peterson, and also Stephen Westberg. And they're going to be talking to us about their various journeys to help you understand a bit more about what some of the standard issues are that we typically think of when we consider doing a mid-career pivot, and how each of these individuals have overcome those challenges. So we're going to jump right into this. We'll start with Jeff Peterson. Tell us a little bit about where you're at right now, and then what aspects of your career caused you to make the jump across from corporate into ultimately fractional CFO.
Where I am today, I actually have a full-time job, and I'm working as a fractional CFO for 3 clients. And I have a software company that I developed over the last year, and I just bought one of my clients. I've been doing fractional work, by the way, for 20 some years now. And so I came out to Colorado to get a company ready for sale, clean it up. I'm kind of a turnaround type fractional CFO is what I really do. So I fixed it all up. We got it ready for sale. We sold it June of last year, and they asked me to stay on to help them transition to a new business model. But how did I get here? I worked in corporate America. I worked for a $350 million company, but it was an unusual company. It was made up of 15 small manufacturing companies that were interrelated. So it was linear motion, things that go back and forth. So I was a small company expert in manufacturing with a big company salary, because it was a big company in total, but I knew all these things about little companies. So I was actually a CFO, COO, and they sold it to a major company. They wanted me to move. They closed down everything. I was on Long Island at the time, and they closed down everything on Long Island and wanted me to move. I said, you know what, I'm not going to move. So they gave me severance, and I was on my own. So I started looking for a job. The big companies didn't know what I was, because I wasn't siloed with, okay, Jeff does this piece of the puzzle. And little companies couldn't afford me, but they wanted me. And so kind of out of desperation, I said, hey, look, you got to help me out here. You can only pay for half my salary. Pay me that half the salary. I'll do all the work you need done, and I'll go find somebody else. So I had too much self-confidence back then. I was a little bit arrogant about things. And so I just said, okay, I know I can do this. Fortunately, I was able to do it. So then I found out I was really good at getting clients. I was able to put enough together to keep things going. So then I always had like 2 or 3 clients at a time. And that was my business model back then.
Okay. And so, Stephen, how did you make that transition from corporate over to consulting and then ultimately to fractional?
I was full-time CFO for a company in Scottsdale. As we grew the company and changed the capital structure, we brought in a majority recap private equity. So they brought in their own CEO, and that CEO wanted me and the CFO position full-time in Scottsdale. I didn't want to move. And so I left the company then, let them go off in their own direction. Came back here, and like many finance people, I'm a terrible networker. You should talk to Patrice about networking. She's really good at that. So I didn't have a great network, and sort of stumbled into some consulting opportunities, some short-term consulting that were interesting. But what I found is, unlike Jeff, I'm not good at sourcing opportunities. And so I began working with a fractional CFO firm out of Boulder, actually. I'm currently CFO for 5 companies and 2 nonprofits. That keeps me busy. And I'm not just the CFO. We've got controllers and accountants on engagements as well. So constantly just juggling the needs of the various people we're working with.
Awesome. And Stacy, how did you move from original company work into your path of starting a company, buying a company, getting over to the franchise side?
Mine was a little different. So straight out of college, I started working in retail management for a women's clothing chain that was here. They had several stores here in Denver. And then I moved up to kind of a regional position where I managed all 8 stores in the Denver market. Wasn't sure where I was going or what that was going to lead to, and not really planning out my career. And unfortunately, we had a kind of a tragedy. So my sister was 2 years older. She was my idol. She had, master's degree in international management. She was working a big job out of New York City for Ford Motor Company. And I just looked up to her. And unfortunately, we found out she had a disease that nobody knew about. And within a week, she passed away. So it really made me stop and think. I had always wanted to work for myself. I just didn't know how to do it or how to make it happen. And that kind of life tragedy was a springboard. I had nothing, I didn't really have a net worth. I didn't own a home. And I went to my parents and just said, look, life is short. We've all just learned that lesson the hard way. Would you back me? Can I borrow some money? And I ended up buying a little hot dog store on the 16th Street Mall in downtown Denver. And I converted it to a frozen yogurt, ice cream, corporate catering business. Grew that for the next 6.5 years and then built a good business, sold it at a nice profit. And then I discovered franchises and the rest is history. I've owned several franchises since then and been a broker for 26 years.
Yeah, so now you help other people to get started on their journey of deciding whether they want to buy their own company or they're going to step into a franchise or multi-franchises, which I just think is amazing. It's an amazing journey, an amazing concept. So next up, what other alternatives did you consider in your journey when you were shifting out of your original corporate role? What were some of the alternatives that were presented to you or that you were able to create for yourself? And how did you go about considering them?
Mine was pretty black and white. I got thrown out of my job, basically, because I didn't want to move. The only alternatives I was thinking about were I got to find a job. Out of desperation, I took half a job. And I said, that's better than no job. So that's really where I started to make decisions. Once I figured out that I could find jobs, then I had to figure out how to scale that a little bit more. At that point, once I figured out I could get jobs, I said, all right, well, I'll make a company. And the company will be a consulting company. And I'll run this consulting company. And I'll make lots of money. I kind of did that. I ended up with 2 employees and I found out I really hated running a consulting company. I really wanted to just do the work. And so I just went back to doing it myself. I onboarded my 2 employees onto one of my clients. And also during this whole journey, it was like 20 years of doing this. There were a couple of times where I tried to buy my clients. There were times where I tried to do startups with people, and none of those ever really went well. I was always trying to find a better home for myself, a better landing place. It took a long time to get there. It's really fun working for yourself.
That's a key driver. How about you, Stephen? What were other alternatives that you considered?
What I've found for myself in this fractional space I'm in is emotionally, it isn't very satisfying for how I'm wired. I'm much more wired to be part of the senior team. I love being part of a team, building something. Being a fractional CFO, dropping into a company, doing some tactical work and maybe some strategic work, I personally find it not deeply satisfying. Emotionally, for me, it's not as fulfilling as being part of a senior team is.
Got it. And Stacy, how did you decide to go from a single location and invest in multiple locations? What was kind of the decision-making process there to expand?
I've been a multi-unit franchisee with 3 different companies. So to me, that's the model that I want. Some people are okay with a single unit. There's nothing wrong with that. A single unit can generate good revenue depending on the business. But my goal was always to build something larger, build equity and sell it.
How did you make the choice about I'm going to invest in purchasing my first one and then I'm going to invest in purchasing multiple ones thereafter? Like, what were some of the decision-making criteria that you used to make those choices?
First ones, I guess I had sold the deli corporate catering business that I had built for 6.5 years and had some cash from that business. I don't know that it was a big decision, quite honestly. It was like, I have this money. I'm not going to go get a job. I want another business. So what business am I going to buy? To me, it was just, I always just knew I was going to invest it in something.
Awesome. So we're going to jump into some of the questions that are being asked by our attendees. Stacy, we'll start with you. How would you suggest that a person goes about setting up their own consulting business?
I would probably get a coach or a mentor, quite honestly. I just think that's very valuable in anything you're doing. You need to put together a business plan, put together a pro forma. That will help you with your rate, I think, as well. You need to know what your qualifications are and what is the market rate? What are other people charging and what will the market bear? What's fair? I recommend a 12-month pro forma, and I've done it with every business that I've ever owned. Do a worst case scenario that you hope never happens, and do the best case scenario that probably won't happen, but you hope it does, and you're going to fall somewhere in between. Don't just jump into it. Plan it out and be realistic. Take off the rose-colored glasses. Look at the good, look at the bad, and then go from there.
The issue of sourcing clients, especially in the internet world, your media presence, your LinkedIn presence, your website and all that is super powerful. And it can hide that there's not much behind that. It's just you kind of doing your stuff. I will tell you that the company I'm working with, the founder of the company, he's very well connected in the Boulder tech community. He's also finding lots and lots of Google search referrals. The company founder was Google searching for fractional firms and came up with us. a professional presence would be really helpful in getting launched.
I agree with Stacy on business plans. If it's a real hardcore business, I have a lawn care business. And so when I went into that, it was all about planning. Going into fractional work, I view it more as almost opportunistic. You're trading in a corporate job for a fractional job. I like the world of small companies, and those clients all know other clients. It's very easy for me to get new clients off of my old clients. Patrice was a coach for me for the last year, and I've been doing this for 20 some years, right? And extremely helpful in getting you to the next step. You can't see what you need to see unless you have somebody guiding you through it. So the hardest part really is just getting started and taking that step and that leap of faith, so to speak. Yes, you have to know what you are and what you're selling, what's your market.
That's a really insightful point that applies whether you're looking for a next job from company to company. It applies if you're going into consulting and you're talking to prospective clients. That really applies well even when you're having coffee conversations with people. Being tuned in to listen, am I able to add value is what determines the fit. So I think that's a really great point, Jeff. Gary has the opposite direction. He's wanting to go from consulting into a company, and he wants to get people's opinions about how do you make that switch, some of the challenges you're faced with. And I'm going to say just off the top, Gary, the first challenge that you're going to face is the perception that you are a consultant. If you don't change, to Stephen's point, if your online presence and your offline presence isn't mirroring the new place you want to go, like taking away the look and feel that you are a consultant and making you look and feel like you are a company person, that's like number one. But Stacy, what other words of wisdom would you share with Gary about that?
With consulting, you probably have a little more freedom. I mean, you probably can control your time more, control your schedule more, a little more flexibility. So I think it's important for you to find a company that has the culture that's going to fit with you. I mean, some companies are more strict than others, and I think it would be more difficult to go from kind of this freedom to this very structured atmosphere. So maybe weigh that out, and what are you comfortable with? What's comfortable for you? And that's something that I would look for in the company that I was going to join. How is it night and day, or is there kind of an easing into it? Because it is, I mean, being self-employed, that's the freedom is the most important thing to me. I can't imagine somebody telling me what to do and when to do it. I don't play by those rules very well, but so I think I would look at that, maybe the culture that some could be very strict, and that may be a hard transition to make in my opinion.
Good point. So Amy has about 4 questions all rolled up into one. So we're going to try to unravel this. How do I find the time to research other opportunities? The time, obviously, you have to make a commitment to it. So I'm not sure that anybody can answer that for you beyond yourself. Great question. How do I find the opportunities? Now that's a bit different, like knowing where to find opportunities. And I'm going to ask Jeff Peterson to answer that one.
First thing is you have to know what are you selling and who needs what you're selling. Just like in job search, you just got to go and start talking to those customers and find out if there's anything there that makes sense for them. Making your profile to present you in a way that people look at it and look at you and say, okay, you're real. You can't go to a company and say, hey, I've never done this before. What do you think? You have to come in with some confidence. And so it's really just exploring that way. I mean, LinkedIn is such a blessing because you can make as many connections to the right people. And so anyway, those are my initial thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think you bring up some really great points, Jeff, that first and foremost, each person needs to define where do my highest and best skills that I love doing. Really important that you choose, while you may have many skills, what's the one thing that you really love to do? Because that's the thing you'll be most passionate about. And then targeting people that are in the same industry or really close by. So it might be the vendors into the industry, it might be the professional services into that industry. So people that are all in that tight-knit circle, because you will be able to be more relevant in your conversation. So it maximizes your time depending on how you look at it. And then Amy's question about how do I determine if a company is going to be a good fit for me and I'm going to be a good fit for them. And that begins with asking yourself a series of key questions. Things like, if I were working with this company and it was 90 days from now, what would I want to be celebrating that we have accomplished together? And that's going to be a really great indicator when you answer that for yourself. Number one, what are you looking for in the culture? Number two, will you like working in this environment? Are they highly structured or are they a little more loosey-goosey? What is your best fit? Stacy, what would you suggest about that?
In the franchise world, I call it validation. And that's what I advise all my clients. When you're looking at a particular franchise concept, part of the due diligence process is validation. And you need to keep an open mind, but I want you to find the most successful franchise owner in that system. Talk to them. Why are they doing so well? Why are they so much better than everybody else? And do you relate to that person? And then you need to take a deep breath or do a shot, whatever it takes for you, but you need to find that person who's floating on the bottom. Why are they struggling? Why are they not doing so well? Is it the system or is it that person? And you can very easily tell, usually from a conversation, but you need to validate. You need to hear the good. You need to hear the bad. And then to your other point, everybody may not agree with this, but I have always felt that passion is misconstrued. I think you need to be cautious about turning something you're passionate about into a business. A good example, you're passionate about golf. And I have seen this with several clients that come to me and like, oh, I love golf and I want a golf business. Like, okay, well, let's talk about that. So if you own a golf business, do you think you're golfing all day? Or are you behind the counter selling golf balls to your friends who are golfing all day? Because there's a difference. Sometimes look at the business, Mr. Handyman franchises. Was I ever passionate about owning a handyman business? Absolutely not. I looked at that business as the vehicle to get me where I wanted to go. I knew I could make that business successful and I knew it could make money. I knew there was a market for it. Let's build it. I'll get excited about it. Let's build it and then sell it at a multiple, which is exactly what we did. But I was never passionate about the handyman business. I hope that helps. But passion, I think, is misconstrued.
I think that's a really brilliant point. It also has to make money and it has to make sense.
Right. Yeah.
Now, you can't hate what you do every day. That would be the antithesis. And when most of us talk about you need to be able to be passionate about what you're doing, we mean you need to be happy and excited about the choice that you're going to go lead a business and manage it. So the time that you want to be jumping out of bed at least 80% of the time on Monday mornings going, yes, I'm really enjoying what I'm doing because I'm making the money that I want at the speed I want, and I'm dealing with the kind of people that I enjoy dealing with for the most part. So you cannot hate doing business to consumer stuff and go try to start a B2C business. Right. I'll say that's not going to work so well. So there's a balance in there, but really great point, Stacy. Rob has a question about how can I simplify what I have done in the past by industry and experience to be more precise or concise when I'm creating new relationships in my network.
The broad industry background is actually a benefit if you're going to get into fractional work. If you're in a big industry background, you have diverse relationships too. If you were networking before, that's good. If you weren't, find all those people that you used to work with and start connecting. In networking, the more connections you have, the more value you are to other people that you're networking with as well. When I teach people about networking, it's always the more concise you can be with who you're networking with as to what you want, the better you're going to do. You have to be able to say, these are the type of connections I want. These are the type of industries I want to get into. This is my expertise. And so if you're very direct and explicit about what you're looking for from them, then they'll help you. But they're not going to connect the dot for you.
I think the broad background is super helpful, actually. But it kind of comes in the whole networking challenge. When you go networking, looking for something you need, it's embarrassing, it's painful, it's just super uncomfortable. But if you turn around and approach it as trying to hear what other people are doing, hear what their needs are, it's actually a lot more fun. If you're talking to people, hearing what their business problems are, your broad background is going to be able to say, I solved this problem for some company I worked with. So I think the broad background is very helpful. With the right attitude, you can take it into a networking environment and really help solve problems. It's not about me and my needs. It's about helping them solve their problems.
Awesome. Cameron had a question about how do I communicate that my skills are in fact transferable. Stephen, how would you address that?
Crafting your response in the needs of the industry you're talking to. I joined a company that had 4,000 technicians installing DirecTV in people's homes. And so going from the airlines to this technology company was a real strange move. But my experience in how to manage the labor forces, the flight attendants, and frankly, the airlines, was really applicable to this technology company trying to manage these 4,000 technicians. I'd be surprised if your experience doesn't apply to a particular company. You won't know the technical details of the company, but that's not really what people are looking at generally. They're looking for, can you solve my problem? And if you've seen problems like that before, you can explain it in a way that resonates with them. I think it works really well.
And then Pete wanted to know, how do you pick the pivot that's the best fit for you?
Start with the end goal in mind. Like, what's the end goal? Where are you trying to get eventually? There's probably multiple paths that could get you there, and then analyze each one. What would you be doing in this one, and what would you be doing in this one? Is this one going to cost you more money? Is this one going to cost you more time? What are those kind of things, and which one looks most attractive to you? You're always going to have more than one option on the table. There's never just one way to get where you want to go.
Amen. That's brilliant. And then the wrap-up question here we're going to get to is Dominic's about how do I communicate about a job change?
Those are interesting questions. The fact that your job's being eliminated, I think it happens all the time. If you were mentioning it to me, I wouldn't be at all bothered by that. I'd only be concerned if you see this as a short-term thing and I'm hiring you as a consultant, but you might take the first full-time job that comes along.
As a recruiter, I would tell you it's not a good idea to focus on the fact that your job was eliminated, because it does bring into question, well, why was your job eliminated? What did you not do? That will beg that question. And then secondarily, to Stephen's point there, if you are going into consulting and you came out of corporate, you have to really emphasize that this consulting thing is not, I'm just sticking my toe in the water and I'll be gone in 6 months when I can't handle it. It's got to be something that you have to get passionate about, be passionate about, and express enthusiasm and have a real reason why going into consulting is something you really want to do.
If we go back to some of the comments earlier on LinkedIn, I would say, my methodology is that I don't know if you're familiar with Rotary or if anybody's a member, but it's, Rotary's motto is service before self. So that's kind of my methodology on LinkedIn. Try to give before you expect to get. If you just approach somebody with, hey, how can you help me? You may not get a response. Whereas I kind of have a 3-pronged approach. I use a system, and I'm willing to share that with anybody if you want. It's a paid system, but it sends out automated emails that I customize, so it sounds very personal. But the first one is, hey, I'm looking to grow my local network and I'd love to connect with you if you're open to it. So once they connect, then my second email is, gosh, if you see anybody in my network that you would like an introduction to, please let me know. I'm happy to make that introduction. Not asking for anything, I'm offering them something. And then the third one is I just send them, I wait about a week and say, gosh, it's been a week or so since we connected and we haven't really talked, but I'd love to know who your ideal client is, or who are you looking for? How can I help you? And I'll share mine. And I just say, I'll go first. And I give them a quick few paragraphs about here's who I am, here's what I do. Tell me about you. And sometimes I just had one yesterday afternoon. Sometimes it turns into a live conversation on the phone, and other times you just switch back and forth on LinkedIn. But I think the whole point is that give before you expect to get. I think it's a better approach than just, hey, how can you help me?
Excellent points. And by the way, as part of our Career Accelerator program, that's exactly the kind of thing that we help you to craft for yourself. And I think on that note, we will wrap up. And thank you all for being here. Bring your goals, wins, challenges, and what all fun things you've been achieving. And we're going to talk more about it.